to another episode of the Storied Way Perspective with Rituparna. Today's special guest is Rameen Khan. You wouldn't know Rameen Khan if you're not on social media. You wouldn't know Rameen Khan if you're not on Instagram. You wouldn't know Rameen Khan if you are not a history buff. You wouldn't know Rameen Khan if you don't love travel. But you would know Rameen Khan and his page CityTales. You would be a follower if you love traveling. If you love stories and you love traveling around the world, around the country, digging up stories, because that's what Rameen does on CityTales. Now, as a storyteller, I love searching for stories. Not because I look for stories which I can tell, but I look for stories which inspire me, which make me feel really very small in the entire universe. Rameen and his page make me feel really very small. I recommend you go and look up CityTales on Instagram with a 95,000 follower. It's a huge community. People who love Rameen's stories, people who keep coming back to listen to him telling a simple tale about a place that he has visited. These are places that he visits over weekends and on his leaves, because he works full time, has a day job in an e-commerce company, and he calls himself the storyteller over the weekend who loves to travel to gather stories. He travels to his nearby city, which is Delhi NCR, and he travels to the farthest of places looking for a story. In this chat, he tells us about the process he follows and what inspired him to be a storyteller on social media. We talk about storytelling on social media and what it does. He talks about how social media is a democratic place and there is a place for everyone who wants to be a storyteller. He has a tip or two for history teachers and how they can make history fun and interesting, and how history teachers can inspire the next generation of history buffs as well as storytellers. He also has a tip or two for you if you are interested in using your smartphone to tell a story on social media today. All this and much more. Listen to the chat now. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Storied Way Perspective. Today is a very special episode because I'm meeting my guest for the first time. And I'm meeting him for the first time because I have been following him on social media for a long time. And ever since we conceived the Storied Way, and I've been curating interviews and speaking to subject matter experts of all kinds, this page, the owner of this page, came right at the top of my mind. Who is he and what is his story? Let's hear it from him. Hello, Rameen. Welcome to the Storied Perspective. For those of you who don't know, Rameen is the curator, the owner of a very popular Instagram handle called CityTales. Now, what is CityTales and why is it there? I would like Rameen to give a little introduction to all of you.
Okay, coming to how CityTales started. So actually, I moved to Delhi in 2015, and I used to love street food. So the origins of CityTales are in my love for street food, because I used to go to Shahjahanabad every weekend to sample street food, and I used to come back. So one fine day I started writing about these street food sojourns of mine, and people used to like them. So then I started researching about ki ये दही भल्ले और बेदमी पूरीज एंड द चाट्स एंड और इनका क्या बैकग्राउंड है, कैसे आए ये दिल्ली में एंड ऑल. So actually my storytelling started from street food, and but while I was going there, I was soaking up all the history that was all around, the historic structures that were all around Shahjahanabad. That's just one part of the story. The second part was that me and my wife, we went to a Euro trip, and we visited Rome and Florence. And when you are in these historic cities, even the most touristy things entail researching about what is Colosseum all about, what is the Vatican City, and what is the story behind these monuments. And when I read them, when I came to know about them, it just blew my socks off. So while I was coming back I still remember when I was coming back from Rome to Delhi, I thought why am I not visiting so much of the built heritage and history that's available in Delhi itself. So on January 2nd January 2018, I visited the Red Fort, and I spent some 5 hours there. I used to I kept on hopping from one monument to another and just started googling the what was each of these monuments all about. And every single monument, even the most the monument which was not even being visited by most of the people, had its own story. And from there, that was visiting Red Fort was that aha moment. So for 1.5 years, from January 2018 to June 2019, I used to randomly scribble stories about these different monuments on my own personal profile. And then some well-meaning friends, suggested me ki, uh, start documenting it on a page, because your stories are getting popular. Why don't you start documenting it on a page? By that time, I had already visited Delhi and some 4 or 5 other cities. So I was writing the stories of cities. So then City Tales, stories of story tales of city. So that's how City Tales came. It was such a simple name. And in June 2019, I started this page. Uh, so it's almost 3 years, and it's around the community is around 95,000 strong right now. So it's been good. It has been a wonderful journey till now.
Yeah, and what I must tell everybody, what drew me to City Tales was the simplicity with which Rameen has documented stories about monuments, about public spaces. He's curated little nuggets of information from history. He calls himself a history geek, right?
Yeah,
And a
yeah, yeah,
hodophile.
yeah.
For those of you who don't know who's a history geek and a hodophile, you need to go to City Tales and see the wonderful, lovely stories that Ramin has curated. And it instantly drew me to his page because I'm a person, I love travel, of course, and I'm sure a lot of you love traveling too. And you love traveling around the world by sitting in your homes without spending any money. And that's where City Tales come in, because you get to know a little bit about history and a lot of culture that Ramin has painstakingly curated and has put it on his page. And it's the simplicity of the language and the honesty with which he presents his little city tales that really drew me. That it's not fanciful. It came across to me as somebody just traveling and documenting what he sees, what he's researched, what he's heard, what he's gathered from people. And it's not something which has been written with the pure aim of growing an Instagram community and becoming an travel influencer. It's not one of those kind of things, but which I will ask Ramin later his future plans about City Tales, because I do see the great potential in him taking City Tales to a much greater height than what it already is in. So while we continue talking about City Tales, I'd also like to tell people that in Ramin and in City Tales, I see a lot of skills which I do recommend to a lot of people. First and foremost, he's a story seeker. You have to go looking for the eye of a storyteller, that there is a story out there, and I am looking for a story which will be meaningful for my community, for my followers, people who will be interested in it. He's a story digger, which is that Ramin will painstakingly research about his stories. And right before this chat, he was telling me about he reads a lot and he reads books, and he will read literature to find out about a particular history of a dynasty and about that monument and about the events that have taken place. So he's a story digger. You have to go and find all the stories, more than what a Wikipedia page will tell you. And the most important thing is that he's a story curator. His page will tell you that he's traveled to a lot of these cities, but he also gathers stories from lots of other sources, particularly the historical pictures. So tell me something. These are very important integral skills, Ramin, for every storyteller today. Tell us, how do you gather these stories that you have on your page?
When gathering a story, for me, the foremost important part is the authenticity of it. I need to be very sure about the authenticity of it. And so if there is a story which has a wow factor in it, but I'm not sure about the authenticity, and a story which is more authentic but lesser of a wow factor, lesser of a so I would more rather prefer a story which I am more sure about the authenticity of that one. Coming to stories, I think there are two kinds of stories out there. One are those stories which are right there in the literature. Somebody in those times, some contemporary historian or some figure has documented that story. and then so you can be sure that there is a high chance of that story being true. So how do I get those stories? Whenever I am researching about a city, I start with the most simplest of available books on, say, Amazon, the most accessible books. So I get one or two of these books, and then I not only read that book, I also dig deep into the bibliography of that book, about the sources that the author has referred to, and then I start finding those other books. So by this chain of events in which I keep on digging in the bibliography of every book that I buy, I'm able to find many more other books, and hence I'm able to get a good corpus of books on a particular city or on a particular monument. And hence there when you read through those books, you can be sure about the authenticity of their stories which have been documented. Then and of course then I ensure I also visit these places first, myself, because almost all my posts are first hand travels. So I want to give that feel of that personalization of that story, that I was there, I felt how I felt it, how was going there felt like, how was being there felt like. So that's one part of it, one kind of a story. Another kind of a story is more of an oral tradition. Now with oral traditions, uh, there are two things to it. There are many of these oral traditions which don't have legs. For example, they are very modern. Some person who just moved on nearby could have made up a story, like these stories की यहाँ से सुरंग निकलती है, वहां से कुछ होता है, और उस तरीके की चीजें. And then there are those oral traditions which have legs, which in which there is a whole chain of people who have been transferring those oral traditions from one generation to another. So for oral history, for oral stories, I ensure that whenever I write about them, I'm sure that there is some tradition which connects to this oral tradition, and then only I write about it. This is how I gather most of my, then as you rightly said, that books and books. So I have a huge library of mine. So when you talked about those archival pics, many of my posts in which I compare the present and past of a monuments via archival pics, almost all of those pics. So I find about these photographers who have clicked those pics in 1800s and 1900s. I find out about them on these books. Then I go to Google. I find a good high resolution image on Google. And many a times when I don't find it on Google, I click via my book. I click an image of that photograph in the book, from the book itself, and then share it on my handle. So that's how I try to share my stories, personalize my stories, research my stories.
Yes, that's something which I forgot mentioning, is that you don't see Rameen very often in on his Instagram handle. You have to scroll through to find a picture of him, which is what even I said. Who's the person behind it? Because I want to know. Though his bio gives his name, but I don't see Rameen anywhere.
Yeah.
But I hear his voice. And that for me was a good pull, that I want to figure out, what does Rameen look like? What does he, I have to imagine him standing in front of this monument, in front of this gate, taking this picture and thinking this, feeling this. So I have to imagine him. And that's again something which draws let's say readers to his page, because they will go to find how did Rameen feel when he stood there and when he saw this and he witnessed this, as if he's recounting whatever happened at that particular venue. So that his personalization is another wonderful thing which draws anyone to his page. Now let's talk about storytelling on social media today. Here we are as an organization, we talk about using storytelling for personal branding, using storytelling to sell well, to market well. And you are from the sales and marketing field outside CityTales, which is your day job. Let's talk about storytelling on social media. What draws people to good stories, positive stories, happy stories like yours?
Okay. I think at the end of the day, all of us are stories itself. We have a beginning, we have a middle, we have an end. So I guess, and a story has a similar structure. So first of all, that is what probably connects it on a more higher level. But when it comes to story, and what you have talked about, I often think about it. Ki what draws people to the stories, and I think that there is so much randomness and so much chaos in our world. Probably these narratives, these stories give a structure and a meaning to that chaos. Uh, people need people need to know where they stand in the scheme of things. People like to know that. People like to know where they what's their position in the sands of time. And I think especially my stories probably help them understand uh, where we stand, where we are going, what is our past. Also, I think positive stories are really good, pleasant escape from our humdrum
Everyday
existence
life.
as it is, everyday life. So listening to these stories, and also people would I have realized that people love getting their minds blown, getting their views changed about us, about a specific stuff. For example, I write about lot of these small villages in Haryana, or these towns in Uttar Pradesh, which are not really connected to as heritage centers. You don't think of them as heritage centers like Delhi or Agra or Banaras or Jaipur. So when I talk about them, and people are like, uh, this place has so much history to it, this place has so much stories to it, and it just changes their perspective about a place. And people probably like that, to be I mentioned this term, blown my socks off. So probably they want to get blown away by stuff which used to look usual, but it isn't usual. So I guess it's a very abstract thing. We can never put really, it's not, I don't know if I can't say it's a science or anything. I think it connects with us on a more deeper level. So, and hence people are drawn to stories, and positive stories especially. But I must tell you, some of my posts are not all very positive. If you have gone through them, some of them are harrowing stories of heritage. So
Yeah.
and they are very shocking also. But via those stories, I am trying to to shake people a little bit about, to not be really comfortable, and people are really proud of the heritage of India, but they should know what is actually the state of 80% of heritage of India. So stories, for me, stories, the positive stories, solve one problem, give one solution, and these shocking stories do another thing.
You mentioned something about, I don't know whether it's a science or not. No, I mean, storytelling is a science, and the way a human brain also responds to stories.
Okay.
There have been scientific inquiry, and there has
Okay.
been proof that our mind are drawn
Wired.
towards a story, right?
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
wired for stories for sure, but they respond to a story. So, like you said, yes, people want to escape from the humdrum of their everyday life. They want to be delighted. They want to experience something which they have not experienced before. These are all natural human desires,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
that's what happens when they watch good content. Like what, if we are on social media, we say, is there anything that's going to make people stop scrolling, right?
Yeah,
So what is going to make stop scrolling is a good story, and it could begin
absolutely.
with a photograph, it could begin with an audio, it could begin with a narrative. But at the end of the day, even your two-line story, like your latest post today about
Yeah.
this panel in Red Fort, which has that
Yeah.
golden
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
panel up there, and you said that it gives you the shivers every time you see
Yes.
that.
Exactly.
You see that, and you realize that your own story in this entire universe, metaverse,
Exactly.
is little, is very little. It's a tiny
Absolutely.
capsule. So there
Exactly.
are like monuments which have stood the test of time. They have witnessed stories. There are so many people attached to them, and you suddenly feel very small, yet
Absolutely.
overawed. So I think as humans, we want that experience, that my story is not the only story in the world which matters. There are
Absolutely.
some which are bigger than me, which have
Correct.
stood the test of time, and they have gone through the ravages of history,
Yes.
and yet they are still standing.
So actually, for the part that you have just said, that's what stories mean to me, and that's why I
Yes.
said I want a story. For me, tells me my position in the grand scheme of things, and that how minuscule I am, and empires have come and empires have fallen. and nations have come and nations have fallen. Great people have risen and then fallen from grace. So we are just a part of that journey that are and it will keep on happening. Time will keep on moving. So these structures and the people who build them, their stories are actually serving this purpose to make us realize that.
Ravi, we do have I spoke to you about the Storied Way, which is a week-long event which we are starting from the 20th onwards.
Yeah.
One of our panels is particularly for school teachers, and we're talking about teaching through stories or storytelling in the classroom. Now, what if history is full of stories, right? Like you are capturing them yourselves.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you studied history at one point of time while you were in school. Were you a history buff even then? And today, when you are a story gatherer and a storyteller, and you're actually visiting these places and looking at history and gathering those stories, do you have a tip or two for teachers who are history teachers or teaching history in the classroom? What can they do to inspire a new generation of students, or inspire themselves first and foremost themselves about the stories that they are sitting on?
So, as answering the first part of your question, now that I look back at the past and I see what has been my journey like, I actually was a history buff in school. So we read history from class 6 to class 10, and I remember that this was hands down my favorite subject. I even remember some of the marks that I used to get in like in class 6. What are the marks that I got? Class 8, what marks I got? I in fact went back to one of my history teachers in school who's added on Facebook, and I asked him, do you remember me? You once gave me 100 on 100 in history, and it was a big high for me. And he said, I remember that you were good in history back then also. So yes, I was a history buff, but somewhere between following a different path, between following a well-worn path in career-wise, which is engineering and MBA, somewhere it got lost, and I was able to rediscover it in 2018. Coming to the second part of it, how can history be made interesting? I will answer it as a generic on a more generic scale, and also that would also apply to the history teachers also. I think you cannot teach history in classrooms. You have to take people out. It simply can't happen that you are telling people stories about anything, about any event, about any person, and you are sitting in a classroom. I think it has to be a more activity based thing, in which and we in India are so lucky that every major city or every minor city or town, it itself has so much heritage. So if a teacher or if any history instructor takes their class to such a place and then starts telling a story, and probably he or she can start from the story of that place and start connecting that place to the bigger scheme of things. As we talked about that, how we as human stand where we stand in the grand scheme of things, we can talk about structures where they stand in the grand scheme of story things, and then start connecting the dots, and that's how you can build more interest. When where a when and this shouldn't stop it at one place. So for me also, once I was hooked onto it, I couldn't stop at Delhi itself. I had to move on. I had to move to other places, and this will happen with the kids. Once they start getting hooked to it, they will start wanting to go to other places and finding those stories. And who knows, this would help us on a much different way. Probably this would boost the domestic tourism also in some way or another. And people don't travel very I always feel that people don't explore things very meaningfully. They just go there and click and selfies, or probably and come back. So if you catch them young, they will start exploring things more meaningfully and traveling more meaningfully. And that and again, this is something, maybe there is no hard and fast reason why they wouldn't know why they are doing this. But as we talked about, people just want to be wowed. People want to feel good about finding things and finding places, and that experiences could, it could have a domino effect, and they could just keep on doing it. So I think that's the problem with the way history is being taught in schools right now.
I would also like to connect, Ramin, what you just said very beautifully with something which I inherently believe in, which is that all of us have an origin story. We
Yeah,
come from somewhere. Our roots are somewhere. If we know our roots better, if we know the history of our
yeah,
roots, let's say the city that each one of us has been born and raised in, we will learn to be more rooted to not just where we origin, but also we will learn to branch out to other cities. So we
absolutely.
will learn to appreciate the
Yeah,
city, the culture, the history, the people.
yes,
We will be more tolerant. We will be more
absolutely.
forgiving. We will be more willing to change and adapt. And I think travel does that, because it
Yes,
travel puts you into an unknown place, an unknown city, and it sort of challenges you to think on your feet and evolve. Like
it's
if
an
you're using your own food, traveling, and you will not get your own food, you will get a different kind of
absolutely.
food on the palate. You learn to evolve, right? So
It
you,
it also
yeah,
humbles you down a lot. It's
yes,
an extremely humbling
absolutely.
experience. So
It's a very
uh,
humbling experience.
yeah, and you get to know a lot of misconceptions you had about other people and other places, and they are just brought crashing to ground. Whatever negative perceptions or whatever misconceptions that you have,
Yeah,
if you travel to those places and meet people who are living in those places, and research about those places, and basically get connected to a place, you would come to know how wrong you were about so many things that you just
absolutely.
believed because you
You're
were
so
just
right.
reading it somewhere and not
It's
experiencing it
first-hand
firsthand.
experience. It is
Yeah,
first-hand experience. You also get to, like I always say, you need to find opportunities where you can step out of your own story, the one story that you're
yes,
living, your reality, and step into other people's reality, or
absolutely.
discover reality on your own terms, so
Correct.
that you get to have these first-hand experiences, and then decide that whatever I've been told about a place, about its
Yes,
people, about the food, about the
yes.
culture. Like my uncle, he says, I will never go to Delhi. Why he
Hmm.
does not like Delhi? Why? Because he's heard that people in Delhi are crooks. So he's onto
Yes.
that, this hard, fast, belief that everybody in Delhi is a crook, and if I'm there, somebody's going to try and cheat me. Now, it all depends on what are his Delhi experiences, or the
Absolutely.
experience of people who he has known. But until unless
Correct.
he visits, travels around the city on his own terms, will he not have a first-hand opinion or an experience? So it's
Yes.
like stepping out of your own story to really gather a story on your own terms and
Correct.
then decide. Wonderful,
Correct.
fascinating. I
Yes.
love the way our conversation is headed.
Yes.
Ramin, my next
Yeah.
question is,
Yeah.
storytelling on social media is huge today. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
huge,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
particularly travel stories. Now we have
Yeah.
travel influencers on Instagram, on
Yeah.
Facebook, on YouTube, people who are traveling
Yes.
full time to make a career, and they're telling
Yeah.
stories by just traveling to different places. I know you have a full time job, and I hope your employer, your boss doesn't get to see this, but I'm going to ask you this question nonetheless,
Yeah.
because I'm
Yeah.
very tempted. Are
Yeah.
you do you think of, have you ever thought of switching your careers to get into full-time storytelling while
Yes.
traveling around the world?
I plan to do it eventually. That's for sure. I just want to be so. I just want to. I want to be sure that whatever I deliver, it has to be a very long-lasting thing. Firstly, and my intent is that to deliver when I eventually switch to it full time. I want to ensure that I can help people travel and explore more meaningfully, and that I feel is my whole. You talked about ikigai in our pre discussion, so probably that's my ikigai. If I can be sure that I'm contributing to more meaningful travel and explorations of people, then I would want to switch to it on a much more dedicated basis. So yes, I want to do it in the future. Let's see what the future holds.
I'm sure you will, Ramin, because
Yeah.
that is where I do see, like I said, I do see an immense potential in City Tales and what it can do as far as traveling and as far as storytelling while traveling is concerned. But let me come to the next question, which is that you do. For anyone who's coming to your page, they are hooked to the content and to the style and to what the stories that you tell. Do you have any tips for people who are your followers in your community, or people who listen to you today and then go and discover you on Instagram? How can they use social media to document stories in their cities, in their towns, and still create their own version of City Tales.
Ah, nice, nice. Firstly, let me for any person who has any means. I would like to tell you ki how I started. I started with a simple mobile and I had one book on Delhi when I started. It was a book by Lucy Peck, and that's the most accessible book on Delhi. And I had a simple mobile. That's how I started. And of course I went to that place to went to Red Fort to explore it. So first of all, it's not a very costly thing. I want to say, to start documenting stuff, because and I was talking about to you too on before also, that social media is such a democratic medium. Digital is such a democratic medium that if you start putting out your stories, and no matter how little the audience is initially, look somewhere, every one of us has to start sometime. And my start, as I said, was in 2015 when I started talking about stories of food. But I kept on writing about it, and I realized that I was getting very positive reactions from people. So it was just that. But if anyone wants to start, first and foremost, they need to have a simple mobile. They need to have the most simplest of books to just to research about it. Go to their place and start writing about it on social media. Uh, Secondly, I think and I'm very very sure about uh, any person who's they don't even have to go a long way to find a. So I started my story from Delhi. There can be a person who is living in Khurja, say, or who is living in, or any small place in, say, West Bengal or Bihar or Punjab. India has so much heritage in each and every tiny village on a tiny town. So just start with your own mohalla, then you move on to your own town, and start writing about it. Then slowly and slowly branch out. I would strongly recommend that you shouldn't go for traditional heritage centers if you are not really living there. For example, if you are not living in Delhi, don't start with Delhi. Start with where your own home is, because that's your first comfort zone. That's the most easiest place that you can access. Start where you are living, and that where it's most nearest, wherever, and then start from there, and then keep on branching out. As I say, expand the diameter of the circle of your explorations, and keep on moving. I started from Delhi, and then expanded. You can start from anywhere and expand it. And then, as I said, social media is so democratic. If your content is good enough, it was so slowly start gathering an audience. You have to be consistent, of course. And then, as I said, that I also switched to I created City Tales, a page, a dedicated page, to document it all at one place. You can probably create a page. Once you have an audience, you create a page and then move to that page. So right now I am documenting my stories on Instagram, Facebook, and also uh, I have a mini community on my own personal profile, who are my friends, who are my old friends, my relatives, my colleagues, people from my MBA, from my engineering. And these were the first people who were, the first people who egged me on, who were responding positively to my stories. And these were my first, the first people who inspired me to expand. And City Tales owes a lot of appreciation that I got on my personal profile. So it's actually I think it's very easy if one just keeps his mind to it.
So you heard it from Rameen. It is very easy to get build a community of 95k. You have to just keep an eye out for good stories and gather them. Begin small, begin modestly, but be authentic, be truthful.
Yeah.
Go ahead and be consistent, And start small. You don't have to think big. You don't need lots of funds. You just need a good smartphone, a simple smartphone, and an internet connection, and good connections with yourself and with the city around you. Begin small, begin close with your closest of community, maybe your gully, your mohalla. Speak to the people who live there. The pan wala shop, which is round next to the corner, that person may have seen that road grow. And I completely understand where Rameen is coming from, because as he was telling me, I do have these stories popping on into my head about the road on which I grew up, and the road itself had a story in itself, and lots of interesting things. All you need to do is just to be rooted and look around, and there's a story happening right there. Gather it, tell it honestly that there's somebody who would like to visit you, your place, your city through your eyes, and that's how you begin. But always remember that a storyteller is nothing without the listener. So like with Rameen, his close group of friends, his colleagues, his family, they were his first audience. Look at building an audience for yourself so that they can tell you where you are going right, and most importantly, where you're going wrong. So build on that. Thank you so much, Rameen, for this wonderful conversation. I do hope to see CityTales grow. And I hope to travel along with you as you gather and tell stories, because I'm going to be sitting in my home and reading you on social media. And for all of you who are discovering CityTales for the first time, go and look up the link in the description below. You're going to find it there, and go and say hi to Rameen. Thank you so much, Rameen. Did you enjoy this conversation?
Yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was such a superb conversation. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.